don't even know if I could.
Do you play the middle or the top?
This is Marna Weston for the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. It's July 11th, 2023. We're at the Pensacola Public Library, and our interview guest today is Pedro Enrique Rodriguez. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
With me, as always, is senior videographer and now filmmaker Deborah Hendricks. Always a pleasure to be with her. And we are on the Gulf South trip. Pedro, you being here is really, really beneficial to us. We want to thank you for being here. By way of letting you just relax for a minute, I talked to you a little bit about my family, my dad being involved in the invasion that went to the Dominican Republic in the 60s. From his point of view, and for our family, he served honorably to go there. He was a jump master paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne. I was actually born at the military base, Fort Bragg, now called Fort Liberty, at the Womack Army Hospital. From there, my dad went to Vietnam, and that has been a part of how the world works. And we found out that we are involved in this because you're from the Dominican Republic. So thank you for being here. Would you please spell your name and give us your date of birth, please?
Pedro, Pedro. You need an Enrique too?
If you'd like.
Enri. Enrique? I-Q-U-E?
Sounds good.
Rodriguez, Rodriguez.
Thank you. And what is your date of birth?
December 17th, 1982.
Okay, December 17th, 1982. When and where were you born?
I was born in the hospital I was born in. It was Santiago of the Dominican Republic, December 17th, 1982, from a small town that did not have a hospital that could support birth, called San Jose de las Matas.
Mm-hmm. We always ask for a little genealogical information. So anything that you would like to tell us about your mom and dad, their names, where they're from, date of birth, anything would be nice.
So my mother is Ana B. Lopez, and her parents are Agustin Lopez, and her mother is Micaela. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what her last name is.
Mm-hmm. Do you have other brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have two siblings. I have an older sister, Ana Patricia Rodriguez, and my younger sister, Eliana Rodriguez. On my dad's side, he's also Pedro Rodriguez, but he's Pedro Antonio Rodriguez. Not sure about his parents' names. I'm sure someone in my family does know.
Okay, awesome. I'd love to be able to talk to you about your involvement with the military. I understand you're in the Navy, but we could just talk about your family for a little bit. What was it like growing up with two brothers and sisters? Did you have chores? Did you live in a city or in a rural area? If you tell us a little bit of your background of how you grew up.
Yes. So I probably want to go back as far back as probably when I was about 5 years old. That's like as far 4 or 5 years old, as far back as I can remember. I remember that I was living with two of my aunts and my grandfather in a farm of, it's not called San Jose de las Matas, it's called like El Canal, which is further deep into the country. And the reason I was living there is because my mom had immigrated to New York, so she was working in the States. And my dad was also working at the time, so I was staying with one of my grandparents, and my two aunts were taking care of me. And then after that, for all the way up until age 10, which is when I moved to New York, in Brooklyn, between that period, my mom would visit for maybe a couple weeks, maybe a month or whatnot. but I mostly stay with an aunt or two, or maybe an uncle and some of my cousins. So I have a pretty close relationship with a lot of my cousins. They're kind of like brothers to me because at some point I probably lived in one of their houses, and I have something around, like my mom has something like 12 siblings, so there was like a lot of houses that I went between.
We have a similar story in there in your younger years. I also stayed with my grandmother, me and my brother Mario, and we just at summertime especially, we would go back home and pick cucumbers and strawberries. We had our first jobs for 50 cents an hour, handing and tying tobacco for our Uncle Odell. So we lived on a farm, and we made money in the summertime to pay our book fees and buy clothes for the fall. So we have fond memories of, that learning how to work kind of thing, being on a farm.
I do remember that. I remember milking cows. I remember, like, if you take the milk before you pasteurize it, before you boil it, you jar it up and you throw it in a cover, it turns into yogurt. And so I always loved yogurt, and I came to the States and I was like, I love yogurt, and I tried it and I could not tolerate it. There were so many things in the States that food palate wise I couldn't tolerate, but eventually I came around to it.
Did you churn butter? Take the milk and churn it into butter?
I think we mostly bought that. By the time I think where we were, that was like a lot of work. Now, I did see it done. It was more of like a novelty, like, hey, this is how you make butter, but not something people did on a regular basis. It was just a lot of work.
Did you have pets when you were growing up?
Ooh, not for a while, because at some point in that period between 5 and 10, my mom did move to the Dominican Republic, so we stayed in a house we had in San Jose de las Matas, and at some point I got a dog, Pito, and I only had him for a little while because at some point he ate something and got poisoned. It was like super heartbreaking. I remember burying him. It's just like, and I really hadn't had a dog like since until like maybe a few years ago, and then it turned out my wife was super allergic, so we had to get rid of him. So no, I haven't had a whole lot of pets.
I'm sorry. So you're currently married?
I am.
And
yes.
Who is your wife?
My wife is Leonor Maria Rodriguez, and she's from Colombia. We met in New York sometime after I joined the Navy.
How did you meet?
So after I graduated high school, I joined the military. I went, Great Lakes, here Pensacola, went on some deployments, and after, I want to say my first deployment, I came back and I went back to New York, back to where all my cousins were, and there was like new people in the family that I wasn't familiar with. So one of my older cousins, Robert, had a new girlfriend, and she was Colombian, and we went out, like, one of my cousins was like, hey, you want to come with me? We're going to go look at some shoes or whatever, just tour New York. I was like, sure. And I remember, like, these specific things I remember. Like, I just came off deployment. I know I'm not really probably functioning or, like, able to socialize properly. So I was like, so don't, like, go hit on people and be, like, super awkward, especially not Robert's girlfriend, Yeah. I just kept thinking about that. And then we met them, and I didn't know who was Robert's girlfriend, and we're like at Payless, I remember, in Chinatown. And so they introduced both of them, but I didn't know who was Robert's girlfriend. I remember it's like, well, Robert always has really pretty girlfriends. It must be this girl, because she's super pretty. That was my wife now.
Oh, wow. So you just saw her as like a thunderbolt in the beginning? You're like, wow, this girl is so nice.
She was super friendly, and I was super standoffish because I was like, I'm not going to be hitting on Robert's girlfriend. So it was like a super awkward day, and then we kind of it was like rough for a while because she thought I was some kind of not very nice person. So
because you were being careful.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, we've been married now. It'll be 20 years in September.
Congratulations. That's wonderful. So do you have children?
Yes, I have a 12-year-old boy, Lucas, and my 18-year-old going away to college this year. is Elisa, goes by Alice Rodriguez.
It's wonderful. Congratulations.
Yes.
So we
It's
kind of
very
got to your deployment, but if I could, let me go back a little bit and ask you, what's your earliest memory of school?
Earliest memory of school, wow. I don't remember much about kindergarten. I remember going, and I remember that everything was great because you got to nap. But it was like a weird period because it was that period when I turned 5 where I was still at my grandparents' house, which was deep in like farm country, like, and there was a local school, but it was like a mixed grade local school. And at that point they had talked about, and my older sister had started school there, but they only started at 1st grade. So she started 1st grade. She's only older than me by 1 year, but she's ahead of me by 2 school years because she started the previous year, went to 1st grade, and then that next year we moved into town where they had kindergarten, and I started in kindergarten, so I was behind by 2 years. But other than that, kindergarten was super pleasant. I remember when I got to 1st grade though, how slow I was at accomplishing tasks. It was like I understood everything, but I was always the last to finish anything. So those are kind of some of my first memories of elementary school.
Do you remember the name of the school?
Oh yes, La Trinamoya de Vázquez.
Okay, and if you were to translate that, ¿cómo se dice en inglés?
It's a name.
That is actually a name.
It's a name. It's named, well, not La just refers to the school, but the lady who is named after is Trinamoya de Vázquez.
Okay.
I don't remember what she accomplished, but I'm sure she's a big figure in the Dominican Republic.
It must have been very kind, because that's when elementary school is built as somebody who's like, oh, this is who children should look up to, kind of thing. Do you remember your principal's name? Or a favorite teacher?
Yes, I do.
Okay, let's go with the principal.
I do remember the principal. I only remember maybe his first name because it was Narciso. I don't remember his last name. But I particularly remember his name because I want to say in 3rd grade or 3rd grade, somewhere around there. I was climbing a tree in the yard, and it was like jumping. I jumped down. When I jumped down, I like dislocated my ankle. No. I didn't know that at the time. So, but I was like, oh, that hurt. I was like, I better walk to the principal's office or walk to school, kind of get this checked out. And it was like an uphill walk to get back to the main building where it was, because it was on a good sized yard, pretty good playground. And I just remember like the more I walked, like the worse the pain got. And eventually I got to a hill and I was just like crawling on the floor. It was just like the most pain I'd ever been in. And then eventually they found me and they took me into the principal's office. And the principal sent me to my house on my cousin Alejandro. He was 13. He sent me to my house on his motorcycle, but my cousin's the one who drove, and he was 13 at the time. And I was like, man, that's, because, driving a motorcycle that has gears on the clutch
and you had to put your ankle down. Yeah.
And then additionally, that the principal would give his motorcycle, he was always very mature, responsible. He was like the oldest of his brothers. So it was like a big deal that he lent his motorcycle so I could get home.
How long did it take for your dislocated ankle to be set and healed?
3 months. I remember that. It was there was like a strike of doctors during that time in the Dominican Republic. So my dad had to like locate our family vehicle was like a 70cc Honda Cub. Not something you want to take to the next town, city over, which is Santiago. So he had to borrow somebody's motorcycle that was like 125cc, something like that, maybe up to 50. So he took that into town, found a doctor, and under like a mango tree, he put a cast on my thing. And it took like it took about 3 months for that to set.
I don't know about you, but I'm a huge fan of mangoes. So you're a mango fan?
I'm a big mango fan.
Okay, awesome.
The Dominican Republic has a lot of varieties of mangoes. So even some people that don't like mangoes, like my daughter doesn't generally like mangoes, like the ones you find here in the States, but she has found some in the Dominican Republic she likes.
My dad's mom, my grandma Harriet, she made a delicious mango pie. So we still try to recreate that recipe, but she just did a good job with it. So I like mangoes. What was your favorite subject or activity in elementary school?
I always liked math. Something about the definite answer.
Did you have a favorite teacher that inspired it?
I don't know. I really liked my high school math teacher, but I had a love for math before that.
Okay.
He was Mr. Gold. It was like an advanced math class, and I really liked that.
Where'd you go to high school?
Park West High School, which no longer is active high school, which is on 50th Street in Manhattan. Yeah, it was kind of a rough high school.
What was rough about it?
I'm not really sure why it was rough, but it seemed like a lot of people that got kicked out of other schools ended up there. It was mainly vocational, as in they had a pilot program, elevator program, culinary program. But other than that, there was also like a general public, and most of the general public tended to be people that got, like, they got expelled from other schools. They might end up there. There was some gang activity and just a lot of things. When obviously went through metal detectors. That's a lot of places now.
Wow.
But there was workarounds for that, and people knew them. And like people would get stabbed with pencils. I remember my first math class actually. It was just so ruckus, and that the teacher that was there, he was super old, and he would try to get people to calm down. And after a few days, it might have been a few weeks of this first year, freshman year, somebody threw a book at him from the back of the class, and it hit him square in the forehead.
Oh.
And he started like pouring blood down his face. And I remember I made it through the rest of that class. I immediately walked over to the dean and I said, you got to get me out of this class. That's how I ended up in honors math.
Awesome. Yeah. Did you have any highlights in high school? Things you're particularly proud or happy of that the high school experience was a good thing?
Generally, it was. So things that I'm proud of is I kind of figured out how to game the system. Like I saw that they had summer school. And I was like, oh, summer school, you get the same amount of credits, but the class is shorter, and the teachers are on the mindset of they just want to go home, they don't want to be here. They're just here to collect an extra paycheck. So the classes are easier, shorter, you get the same amount of credit. So I actually started going to summer school the summer before I was a freshman. And I was like, if I do this for 3 years in a row, I could graduate in 3 years. So I had planned on doing that. But somewhere along my second year, I think I started just kind of, probably anxiety, started freaking out about, oh wait, I just took my PSATs, I'm supposed to take my SATs. Wait, that means I'm technically a junior, not a sophomore. I'm behind on college applications, I haven't applied to college, I don't have any scholarships. And I just kind of had a meltdown. Actually, that might have happened like my third year, which would have been my senior year. I ended up dropping some classes, and then like my last technically senior year, I was taking gym, health. It was like 2 or 3 classes, and I would just go to work.
Where did you work?
I worked in several places. I don't know exactly where I was working during my senior year, but there was this imported rugs company called Kalati. They had pretty expensive rugs. I mean, I know some of the rugs they had there were like $5,000-$10,000, but most of them were a lot less than that.
Wow. Were you actually selling the rugs, or were you helping with the move the inventory and stuff like that?
Move inventory in and out. They had a huge basement full of imported rugs. We'd roll them up, show them to the customers. If they had a trade show, we'd go to that trade show. We'd like set everything up. We'd roll everything back up, put everything away. And I worked at Broadway National Bank, like copy boy. If somebody got audited, they needed to pull all of the transactions. Some of them were on microfilm, some of them were on paper, some of them on actual, I don't know what you call them, like check receipts in a box in the back. So wherever they were, I had to track them down, make a copy of it. So every time somebody got audited, that's kind of what I did. Copies, 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 copies.
Did any of those experiences help you when you left high school, or was it just the job I had when I was there?
I mean, I don't know how they helped me, but it definitely helped me appreciate other jobs.
Okay.
I remember like looking through microfiche. They call it microfiche, but it's microfilm. I just remember going through it, and it was so boring.
On the machine with like the rolls, you'd see like every go by real fast.
Yes.
Yeah, it's microfiche. I know that.
And it was just so boring. And it's all I did all day. And I was a high school kid with 3 classes. So I went to parties from time to time. I didn't get good sleep. And I'd be just rough. It was just rough. So did I learn anything? I don't know. Probably. I appreciate knowing what microfiche is, even though it's not something people use.
Cool. So from those things, you graduate. Did you decide right away that you were going to go into the service, or did you look at other options before you moved to that your ultimate career? So
the reason I picked Park West High School is because there was only 3 high schools in New York that offered aviation programs. And only 2 of those high schools offered a private pilot license. And one of them was, I want to say Wingate, and the other one was Park West. And Wingate had just had like a lot of like gang activity and crime, and it was in Brooklyn, which would have been preferable for me because I lived in Brooklyn. But it was in the news. It was just in the news a lot. And I was like, okay, I don't think I want to go to that part of town. So I went to the other high school, which is Park West.
Did you get your pilot's license?
I did not. I think a lot of distractions in high school, including like because up to that point, school-wise, I had gotten good grades, stayed in honor roll, stayed in honors classes, and like I said, I started high school by going to summer school because it was easier, but it was hard. I'm not really exact, I can't pinpoint why, but keeping my grades up just became difficult, and you had to keep your grades up in order to stay in that program, to be able to actually get your private pilot license. We had career days, and we had, 2 things happened that kind of affected what I wanted to do. Our avionics or aviation teacher, mid through the semester of our second year, he was just like, well, I got a job at UPS, and he left. And we're like, oh. So it just kind of started rolling my wheels of like, okay, well, what does this look like to become a pilot? It's hard to get hours even after you get your private pilot license. Where do people get hours? They either get them in the military, or they become some kind of private pilot license instructor so that they can make some money while they accumulate their hours. Because you need the hours in order to be hireable by airline or UPS or FedEx or something like that. And like the pinnacle of being a pilot is you become a captain of an airline, flight, and you're going to like Europe, or you only do 1 flight every once in a while. So like, but you're still away from family, and it just started to lose kind of its luster. But conversely, we had because we had a career day, we had an air traffic controller from New York Center come in. And he just made it seem like he was a very unassuming guy. He was just like, yeah, I work for New York Center. He kind of explained what that was. And I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do.
The light bulb went on.
I want to be an air traffic controller. And I could work here in New York and make good money. How do you become an air traffic controller? So there's 2 pathways. There's 2 primary pathways. You go to Embry-Riddle, which is a great school, and I was dead set on that. But as I started getting closer and closer in high school, and I was like, oh, I haven't done my SATs, I haven't done this, I haven't applied for scholarships. I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to pay for. There's no way I'm going to be able to pay for school, and I'm not going to get myself or my mom into debt. I'm not putting that on them. She's already gotten me this far because she was the only breadwinner and the only one that was raising all of us. So the only other pathway where I could pay for my air traffic control school was to join the military. And the Navy was the only one that would guarantee me a job. All the other services, like, you get something close to it. So at that point, my mind was set. I took the ASVAB. I scored well enough to be able to get any job. And when I went and they showed me the job list, I was like, it's okay. I don't need to look at it. I know exactly what I want, air traffic control. They're like, you can't do that because you're not a citizen. I was like, oh. And my whole plans went sideways.
Say what?
Yeah, so then I picked parachute rigger because the description sounded amazing. I'm sure all the job descriptions sound amazing. And that's what I did for 4 years for the Navy. And when I got the opportunity to change jobs, I was already a second class, which is the E5. And I came back here to Pensacola, went through A school again. And then I went to Chambers, which is in Norfolk, and that's where I was able to get my 2 tower tickets and get some radar experience. And essentially at that point, I'd done it. Like, I was hireable. I could have got out. I could have gone work for the FAA. I had both the school, I had the experience, I had the certifications. But at that point it was like, well, I'm halfway through, 10 years in the Navy. I've got, I could do another 20. I mean, I could do another 10. This wasn't so bad. So, and here I am. At 22, I'm about to retire in like 2 days.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I always thought, I knew back in the day that was one of the ways that people would gain their citizenship by going to a country and fighting in its army or its Navy or Air Force, and then you would automatically be conferred citizenship. So that did not happen for you automatically.
So, not before I joined. So what happens is, once I joined, it kind of streamlined the process. There was a way once I joined to streamline it. It was so painless that I really don't even remember doing it. I remember I applied for it. Eventually I got some interviews, came back, everything checks out. You are who you say you are. Boom, boom, boom. Go do your citizen. And it was
Do you remember taking the oath and hearing the judge say those things?
I do remember that day. I remember the room too.
What was it like? How many people were there?
Ooh, I don't know how many people were there, but I remember it was in Norfolk. The name of the street is like at the tip of my tongue. But I was already at my first command, obviously. How was the room? I had windows in the front. I don't think it was a courthouse. You just walked in to the right.
Raise your right hand.
Raise your right hand, A bunch of people had flags. I don't know if I had any flags, but it was pretty nice.
So what was your first official job? You say you were eventually E5. What is your current service, your job and your rank now?
So I'm an E6, air traffic controller. But like I said, originally I came in as a parachute rigger. So, but you're asking me if, like, right now,
Yeah,
I'm at AC1. That's my official title, air traffic controller, first class.
And when you think about what you do every day, making sure planes don't run into each other and there's a clear airspace over and defending the airspace of the United States from all foreign and domestic enemies or whatever, how do you feel about what you do and your place as in a society for doing it?
I don't know. It's weird because I did a lot of air traffic control at that first command that I spoke about where I got my tower tickets, and the training wasn't pleasant, but it was good and it was a great accomplishment, and I loved that part of it. But after that, I went to the ship. That's completely different air traffic control. And after the carrier, I went to Naples, Italy, no air traffic control. So the one thing with the Navy is I've never, every time I've changed commands, completely different job. I've done I know on the ship I was doing things like career counselor because we were in the shipyards. That's the other thing, a lot of shipyard periods. That's rough. It was 3 shipyard periods my first ship. And then
what does that mean when you're in a shipyard period? What does that entail?
So the ship has a cycle of, it goes on workups, as in it prepares to go on deployment, get its crew ready, get its aircraft ready, get everyone ready for deployment, and that requires a ton of training, and a lot of that requires going out to sea. So it's a lot of going out during the week, coming back for the weekend, going out for 2 weeks, coming back for a weekend, kind of a lot of that. Maybe going out for a month, doing some exercises, pretending to do some things, coming back. And you do that, say for a year, or let's make up, right? Do that for a year. And then all of that is in preparation for actual deployment. Then you go on deployment, you patrol the seas, you go to wherever you're gonna go, the Middle East, whatever sea you're gonna patrol, and you execute your mission. When you come back from that deployment, a lot of things have worn down and broken, and you've just kept them together with duct tape or whatever, not actual duct tape, but you just kind of kept things together. And the ship needs to repair. And it might go on to several versions of a rehab period, and you call it, and that's normally a shipyard. So, and that period, in my opinion, is the worst. You're not doing the job you were trained to do, because I'm an air traffic controller. That guy over there is like, it might be like an aircraft mechanic. There's no aircraft on board anymore. There's just very few people are doing the job they were trained to do. So
it's like hurry up and wait.
Yes, if you get satisfaction out of doing your job, now you have to do something else. And those jobs usually are not pleasant, and it's hot because sometimes they have to shut down the AC. If it's winter, it's cold. It's loud because they have to chip paint. You have to chip paint, grind, paint. It's just loud, uncomfortable, dusty, and this could go, I've been on shipyard periods that are like 3, 4 months, 5 months, up to a year, but some of them are 5 years long. And it depends. Your experience could be you show up to the ship, hey, we don't have a job for you, so you can just go home or you can go do this other thing. But your experience might be like, hey, we don't have a job for you. You go do this job now.
Did you ever have, first of all, are you allowed to talk about a particular ship and deployment you were on? And if so, can you tell us what was that ship and what was that deployment like? Something that you really liked?
So my first ship was the Bataan, the USS Bataan, LHD-5. And
what type of ship was that?
LHD is an amphibious ship, so it's kind of a flat bottom, has a door in the back. It drops down into the water, so either amphibious vehicles can come on. It might be a tanks or LCAC. LCAC is kind of like a hovercraft, so it has a lot of versatility.
Is it armed? Is it an armed vehicle?
The ship itself? Yes.
So what does it have, like cannons or missiles?
No, not like that.
Machine guns?
Its main mission is that it has aircraft, or that it brings tanks or brings supplies to the fight. So a lot of our operations, so it just doesn't have the range that a carrier has, because it doesn't have catapult. It has different type of aircraft. If our aircraft, it has vertical takeoff, which is like an AV-8. They generally don't have the range that other aircraft do. So it can do more things, but the things that it just doesn't have as much range. Is really what it is.
So would it be dropped off by a bigger ship, or it is the ship that brings that stuff?
It's the big ship
that brings
of that group, and a place. One example, and something that I'm super proud of, is I remember coming back from a South Pac, some exercise we were doing in South America, and we're heading up north, and there was like a storm, and we're obviously watching storms all over the time when we're out to sea. There was a storm ahead of us, and it might interfere with us getting back to port in Virginia on time. So we sped up. So the ship sped up and actually essentially cut around Florida, and cut in front of the storm so that we could make it to port on time. And it was like, man, that's super cool, right? But then the storm kept cutting into the Gulf, and it intensified in the Gulf. Intensified so much, it hit Category 5, and then it was just like, we're gonna need to be there. And that was Katrina. So we followed that storm in, and we were like the first ones on scene providing rescue effort. Even the Mexican, we had some Mexican helicopters on our deck. So something that's pretty cool about amphibious ships is they provide a ton of relief support. So the hurricane in Haiti, the baton was there. And whenever there's like a tsunami, more than likely an amphibious ship is going to pull up because they can get closest to the shore because they have a flat bottom. They can raise and lower, and they can have other vehicles come on. So that is one versatility that they have.
Now, how about maybe another ship you were on where the deployment was not necessarily as enjoyable? You know, maybe you, I don't know if you ever were in combat or a combat close situation. What vehicle, what ship might that have been?
Well, I mean, on that same ship, we went on a ton of deployments because I joined that ship in February of 2002. So we were like hot and heavy, and you know, we were the most patriotic, like, you know, it was immediately after 9/11 because I joined in September of 2011, went to boot camp, went to A school. By February, I was on deployment in the Gulf, and I never, like, you know, it was just like, I didn't even know what Bahrain was, you know, it's just like, and all of a sudden I'm driving across Bahrain. So I joined the ship on deployment. I thought that was super cool, came back from that, but it was like immediate turnarounds. We would be in port for, seemed like only months, and then we go back, because we did 3 deployments during my 4-year period that I was there. One of the deployments was, we were all on Christmas leave, and we got called back. This must have been 2004, and...
While you were home for Christmas, and they said, hey, report for duty. You had to stop what you were doing and come back.
Yes, we had to come back. Now, I had already done, so leave goes in 2 parts. I had already done my leave. Other people that were on leave got called back, and I was like, ooh, they don't usually do that. We all reported on board, and it's like, what's going on? Can't tell you. We're going out to sea. Where are we going? Don't know that. We went up to one of the bases where we load up ammo, and we were there for 3 days, taking on bombs and missiles, and you know, and it was just like, I've been here before. This is what we do before a deployment, and it's just like, why are we taking on so much ammo? And we took on a lot of ammo. And then we, I think, picked up some helicopters and some aircraft, and then we started, having been across the Atlantic many times, there's just something that you're like, I think we're crossing the Atlantic. Still hadn't been told. By the time we got to the Med, we knew we were at the Med. It's just like, we're like, a week or so, we were, you know, stateside in Norfolk.
On the Med, you mean the Mediterranean Sea?
Yes.
Okay.
And obviously, by the time we're crossing, you know, the Straits of Gibraltar, we're like, okay, we know what's going on.
We're going to the Middle East.
Yeah. And one night, Bush comes on TV, and I don't know what the speech is called, but I only know it as a run and hide speech, where he tells Saddam, like, run and hide.
Oh, so this is George Bush, the president's father, George Herbert Walker Bush, that Bush. Or no, it had to be. It had to be George W. Bush.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, 2000.
So,
okay, sorry.
This must have been around 2004. And like that run and hide speech, and it was just like, oh man. But I know how the war is seen now, and it's just like, oh, that might have not been justified. But being there in that moment, fighting for freedom, like that felt awesome. Like, oh, we're doing the work. We're here. And like the next night, we were just bombing the crap out of Iraq. And that was us.
Wow.
And I know how that looks now, but being there, part of that, in that moment where we're still like super patriotic,
You're proud of your service.
Oh yeah.
So, do you believe in this country and like what we do?
Yes.
Sorry to put you on a vague spot.
It's all complicated. Who does what for why, I don't know.
Well, like 9/11, you were talking about how that's when you were just getting involved. So you must have been feeling, wow, the country's under attack. I've got to do my part. Can you talk a little bit about how you felt coming into service around those times?
So honestly, me joining up, like I said, the decision to join the Navy wasn't predicated by 9/11. It was, oh, I want to go to Embry-Riddle. I can't go to that. I can't afford that. I want to be an air traffic controller. This is the only pathway. So I had already joined and was signed up. And I'm like looking for things to do. It's September of 2001. I don't have a job. I already graduated high school. I ship out in a week or so. And then, you know, it's like, oh, I should go sightseeing before I leave New York. It was actually in my mind to go visit, because people that are from somewhere don't go visit tourist spots. So I'd never been to the Twin Towers. I was like, that was on my to-do list because I had already been to the Empire State. I already been to the Statue of Liberty. I was like, I should go to the Twin Towers. I've never done that. And I remember earlier that week I went, but it was like $11. Now at that point I didn't have a job and I couldn't pay the $11 to go up. So I was like, this week, some point I gotta go. And that morning I remember my dad called me, which I hardly talked to him, but he woke me up and he's like, have you seen the news? And like turned the TV on and it's like one of the towers is on fire. And I look out my window because I remember out my window from Brooklyn, you could see the skyline. And I saw that like one of the towers was on fire. And I was just like, what is going on? And I was like, and in my mind, because a plane had hit like other buildings before, like the Empire State Building. And I was like, well, that's terrible and tragic, but some idiot must have messed up. And like when the other plane hit, I was like, oh no, this is bad. Like, and I immediately connected the dots of, so you think back to Pearl Harbor, we got hit, somebody's getting hit. And I was like, I'm part of that. Like, oh. So I didn't join because of that. But once I joined, it felt really patriotic and like the right thing to do.
Now that you're on the verge of retirement in the next couple of days, how do you feel about your service and what's your next step?
Man, that's a loaded question. How do I feel about my service? Very proud of it. I'm glad of all the opportunities I got. I got to see a lot of the world. One of my tours was in Naples, Italy. I spent 4 years there. Love Italy and the Italians and their culture. And it was in Naples, Italy, and that was phenomenal. Learned a little bit of Italian. Spent a lot of time in Norfolk. I don't know. I'm super glad I did it. Glad of where I'm at. What do I do next? I have days where I'm like, I should do nothing for a little while. I have days where I'm like, I should go get a job at like Lowe's or something. I invest in real estate a little bit, like buy, flip houses. I've done a few of them already. So there's days where I'm like, I should continue to do that. So,
do you ever think about public service or government? I mean, I think our country could probably use the perspective of people who have served in its leadership.
That is, I don't know about public service, but the only thing that I think about a lot is I'm noticing as I talk to other veterans is how many people have done a lot of service. 14 years, 4 years, or whatever it might be, and they have nothing. And it's just like, hey, do you get anything from, obviously they don't get anything from the Navy or Army or whatever it is. You get anything from the VA? No, nothing. What would I claim? And I was like, there's a lot. You could, like, did this happen? Did this other thing happen? And you start kind of digging in, because they're like, no, there's nothing wrong with me, and there's nothing I would claim. And it's just like, there is something. Like, let's go through your medical record. Let's see what's in there. So I started kind of doing that on the side, and I really like that. I helped my cousin who did 14 years, and the CEO of the company that I'm interning with, he also hadn't filed. And I was like, okay, can I look through your medical record? Do you mind? And I went through his medical record, and I showed him all the things that he could possibly claim that he could get compensation from for the VA. And there's a lot of people out there, a lot of veterans who end up homeless, who have not filed for anything, who could be receiving compensation.
So to help your fellow veterans find out what they're due for the service.
If I could get into that, that might be I don't know. But honestly, right now, I feel like I'm back in high school, and I'm like, I don't know what to do.
Do you ever think about going back and getting your pilot's license?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. Like, the only other time that I considered becoming a pilot was once I was there's a few programs where you can go blue to green and go to the Army and fly helicopters. And I like the idea of flying helicopters, probably because I grew up in the 80s and 90s and watched a lot of Rambo movies, so it's like, oh, being a pilot.
Magnum PI.
Yeah, so I was like, yeah, helicopter. So, and there are programs where you can go to the Army, but it always kind of turned me off because, well, I don't know. I don't want to talk bad about the Army, but I don't like that.
Yeah, I see the game every year. It's pretty serious.
No, it doesn't have to do with the game. Things like Pat Tillman and how they did him and then try to cover it up.
Yeah.
There's that girl in Texas.
Yeah. Fort Hood.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just so many, and it just goes on. It's just like so many examples of like, they kind of do people dirty. And then on top of that, helicopters just kind of fall out the sky sometimes. So it's a few turnoffs. So that was the only other pathway I would have considered, is going helicopter. So, no, it doesn't appeal to me.
Well, you've done your service, but with the knowledge you have, you might be of great benefit to other veterans or other people. I mean, the country always needs people that really are selfless and thinking about others. So you have a lot of experience. It's very impressive what we've talked about today. Yeah. Mr. Rodriguez, on behalf of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, I want to thank you for this opportunity to talk about you and your service. We're here in Pensacola and other things going on here. Is there anything that you'd like to talk about what's taking place locally in order to add to the interview?
Ooh. I wouldn't know specifically what to mention. What do I don't know. I go to like activities that happen here in Pensacola?
Activities or projects, things that you're aware of in the news. Your friend, the councilwoman who asked you to be here, maybe a little bit about her and what she's doing, but not to put you specifically on the spot about any of it, because I don't know.
I feel on the spot.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you feel on the spot, we can lighten it up. What's your favorite flavor of ice cream? I'm a chocolate fan myself.
Strawberry shortcake.
Okay, strawberry shortcake.
I don't know. I like the wine tasting some of the wine shops do around here.
What's
nice.
best movie you've seen recently?
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, which like the very last one, or the Into the Spider-Verse one?
The one that followed Into the Spider-Verse. What is it called?
Okay. It's the one that's out now.
Yes.
I haven't seen it yet.
I don't know what it's called. Yeah.
So you're a Marvel fan or DC?
Both.
Both Marvel and DC.
Yeah. I don't see why you have to choose.
Okay.
It's a lot of this or that going on. I like both. I love Batman and Superman, but I love the Marvel character. I mean, Spider-Man is like super lovable character.
I saw Black Adam recently, and at the end of it, Superman shows up, and I'm like, "Whoa, what's this all about? These guys are gonna fight? Like The Rock is gonna fight Superman?" Kind of crazy. You have a favorite sports team? Either football, soccer, baseball, basketball?
That's loaded. So technically, I guess I'd be like a Jets, Mets, Nets fan.
Okay.
And when I was in Naples, I obviously became a fan of Forza Napoli. But realistically, I don't follow sports. When I was in Naples, because you're in such a hour shift, I did it for years where I would stay up and watch the game.
The Super Bowl, for example. What's watching the Super Bowl like in the service?
I mean, they usually put on a big show, and even if you're on deployment, they'll broadcast that. So it's gonna be a big thing. But because of that hour shift, that when because you are on that hour shift, whether you're on a ship or you're in Naples, Italy, so it just became too much of a headache to stay up all night and then have to go to work, and it just got old, and I was just like. And once I stopped watching sports, I realized I got my Sunday back, and I never wanted to give it up again.
Did you find any other passion, listening to music or being involved in civics or looking at art or bowling?
It's probably how I got into real estate, because I started really learning about how to invest and how people buy houses and creative financing, and just there's a lot to learn about that. And I every time I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that, I realized I know quite a bit about that world, and it could be a good pathway for me if I want to. I'll probably continue to do it, at least on the side.
Are you going to do real estate in Florida or New York?
Oh, I can't go back to New York. I'd be poor in New York.
Okay, so
I've gotten accustomed to a standard of living, which is having things like a car, a house, you know, a driveway.
You don't like the subway?
I love the subway, but I'd like to own my own car. And in New York, it's like my wife has a car, I have a car, my daughter has a car. There's no way in New York City. Where? Like
$2,000-3,000 a month each to park them, right?
I mean, I'd have to be some kind of super millionaire to be able to have my daughter with a car, my wife with a car, me with a car. Get out of here. So, although most of my family is still in New York, my mom will probably never leave New York City. I can't go back. I don't want to give up the comforts that I've gotten used to.
Well, as I was saying then, again, with our thanks for being involved in the program and coming during the interview, we're very appreciative and thank you so much. If there's anything you would like to say, no matter what it is, please feel free to do so. And at the conclusion of your remarks, that will conclude our interview, again, with our thanks.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. Appreciate it. I think something I didn't mention that you kind of asked me about was the ships that I've been in, and I didn't mention after I left the Norfolk, where I got my controlling experience, I went to the Truman. So you asked me about, and I did a deployment with them, and that was pretty pleasant. It was a 9-month deployment, but we left on time and we came back on time. And the predictability of knowing when you're going, what port you're hitting, and when you're coming back was pretty spectacular. None of the other deployments I had that had ever happened. It's pretty nice. I didn't mention here at what I actually do now, because I don't do any controlling, is I'm an instructor for the Air Traffic Control Schoolhouse. And that I've loved. I did learn I love teaching and like teaching air traffic control and watching that process of how to like, okay, you're not understanding this, so what is it that, how do we get you to understand this? So yeah, that was it. Thank you for having me.
You play the middle or the top? Oh my goodness.
What?